Hello, we'll just give about 5 minutes, 2 more minutes for more people to join the session, then we will start. I think we will start. Greetings, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining IDEV, Independent Development Evaluation of the African Development Bank, as we host this session in the context of the 2022 ECG Spring Meeting. We hope that you will find it interesting and useful in your work, in your line of work. I am Jacqueline Yagahima, a Principal Knowledge Management Officer with IDEV, and I will be moderating this session, which is entitled Designing an Impact Evaluation with Robust Methodologies. What we learned from IDEV's recent impact evaluation of the AfDB-supported last mile connectivity project in Kenya. Our presenters for this session today are Rufael Fassel. Rufael is the manager of the IDEV division that conducts evaluations in the area of infrastructure, industrialization, private sector, energy and power systems, climate change and green growth, and regional integration. And he gave oversight for this particular evaluation. We also have Raki Bolde and Eustace Uzor, who are both evaluation officers in IDEV, and they were the evaluators for the evaluation that we are looking at. We will receive the presentation, which will be started off by Rufael, and then it will be followed by a question and answer session. So if you have any questions that come up in the course of the presentation, please feel free to type it into the question and answer box right at the bottom of your screen, and they will be answered after the presentation is made. And also, if we have time, we shall be able to take direct questions from the audience. The session is being recorded, and a copy of the recording will be placed on the IDEV website. So let's get started. I would like to invite Rufael, please take the mic and set the context for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Africa Development Bank, the Independent Development Evaluation Department, it's my pleasure to welcome you to this webinar. This webinar is really timely and important for several reasons. Just highlight few. First one, linked that, as you know, impact evaluation has been increasingly recognized as important to both the donor community and to national policymakers across the globe, as it seeks to establish empirical evidence whether an intervention has made a difference in the lives of people. Secondly, as you know, there are very little impact evaluation on infrastructure, particularly on energy infrastructure intervention. And measuring that, impact of energy intervention is a difficult task and often requires a creative approach, and has its own methodological challenge. And to this end, we'll share our experience, how we're able to measure the impact of this project using robust design methodology. Third, I believe never before we have such a wealth of new tools and knowledge so widely available related to the strengths and limitation of impact evaluation. So it's good to have that conversation with you. Last but not least, we need to find a new creative solution for impact evaluation to assess the core area of investment about what works, does not work, how, for whom, and why. In particular, if when there is capital intensive investment, large infrastructure projects, which may be difficult to tackle with conventional impact evaluation approach. So against this background, this webinar will be an exciting opportunity to exchange ideas and insights on the importance of the robustness of the impact evaluation design from our recent impact evaluation experience. Let me hand over to Raki to briefly present what we learned from this impact evaluation with regard to robust design methodologies. Again, I welcome you and wish you a successful webinar. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Raphael. So I will be sharing my screen for the presentation. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm going to present the last impact evaluation that was led by IDEV on the last mile connectivity project. The evaluation was completed in 2021. For the outline, I'm going first to present the project background, the methodology, then the approach that we use for the sampling, the results, and finally, the lessons learned. The last mile connectivity project was phase one was approved in 2014 by the African Development Bank, although the implementation only started in 2016. So the main goal of the last mile connectivity project was to provide universal access to electricity in Kenya by targeting low-income groups. So, and because before the project was approved, the electrification rate was low. In Kenya, the national electrification rate was around 32%, and the rural electrification rate was around 19%. And one of the main issues explaining a low electrification rate was due to affordability issues. So this project tried to tackle the affordability issue by subsidizing the cost of grid connection. So the subsidy was around 15,000 Kenyan shilling. The design used by the last mile connectivity project was to use some existing infrastructure, transformers that were not at a maximum capacity. So it was to target households that were living within that 600 meters threshold to benefit from those transformers that were operating below capacity. And to do so, the project expanded the low voltage network by around 12,000 kilometers, and some of the installation included meter boards, poles, conductors, low volt stays for beneficiaries within the transformer protection distance. So for the project background, the following figure gives us a theory of change. And in total, the project cost was around $153.35 million. The activities included the grid expansion and the installation of equipment. The theory of change identified different type of outcomes, direct outcomes, intermediate outcomes, and impacts. And thanks to the subsidy, one of the expectations was to have a reduced cost of energy, but also to see household change the composition of the energy consumed. For instance, households were expected to decrease the use of firewood and also kerosene. So the project was expected to see an increase in grid electricity, use of energy, and also an increase in electrical appliances and a productive use of energy, because definitely one of the goals of the project was to see businesses benefiting from electrification. So among the intermediate outcomes, thanks to a reduction in the composition of energy consumed, it was expected to see a bit equality in the house, also to see women spending less time doing household chores, having children studying for longer hours, but also we expected to see an increase in employment and an increased access to information. And some of the impacts identified were an increase in subjective well-being, thanks to the previous outcomes, improvement in health, and also women. Women were expected to maybe have a greater empowerment thanks to having more economic opportunities. Children were expected to see an improvement in their education. And finally, for household also, we expected to see an increase in income and consumption. So as previously stated, the main objective was to have a credible estimate of the causal impact of the LMCP phase 1 on a number of previously cited outcomes. And one of the main reasons was because we wanted to generate lessons and provide recommendations to maximize the impact of ongoing and future electricity access projects. The LMCP phase 1 was followed by different phases, phase 2 and 3, but also recently a project similar to the LMCP was approved in Rwanda. For the methodology, one of the main issues, as previously highlighted by our division manager, Raphael, was that it is very difficult to have a causal impact, measure the causal impact of infrastructure project, in particular energy infrastructure project. This is because of an endogenous placement of such infrastructure. Most of the time, they are placed in areas where they are most needed, or in areas with the most economic development potential, which means that comparing areas that have benefited from such infrastructure with areas that did not benefit from such infrastructure is not going to yield a good causal impact, because areas without this infrastructure will not be similar to those that have received it. So we have issues finding a good counterfactual, as we say, due to the non-random placement of electricity infrastructure. And many factors influence the placement of this infrastructure. And in the case of the LMCP, the main decision to include some areas to be part of the program was because of low electricity access. One of the main criteria was based on that. Areas with low electricity access were prioritized, but also areas where the transformers were at low capacity. In an ideal world, there would be a randomized placement of such transformers across regions, counties, and sub-counties. However, like we previously discussed, it is very difficult, so we do not have a randomized situation. Fortunately, in this case, we exploited the design of the LMCP, which was based on a 600-meter threshold. Household within that 600-meter threshold benefited from the project, and those beyond were not eligible to benefit from the project. So it created a solution for us to use spatial regression discontinuity design based on the 600-meter threshold. So one of the main assumptions is that households that are located just above the 600 meters threshold are similar to the households that are just below the 600 meters, and it is as good as random, because we suppose that households do not select themselves around that 600 meters, and also they don't even know maybe at the beginning of the program that there is a 600 meter threshold. So we are able to select random household around that threshold. And like we said, this is the main identification assumption to use the regression discontinuity design. One of the main issues in this case for the selection of the household had to do with having not only different phases of LMCP phase 1, LMCP phase 2 and 3, but also having pre-existing lines. Like we could have areas where households were previously connected with previous lines from KPLC, the Kenyan Power Lightning Company, but also we could have areas where we could have household connected through phase 2 and 3. Since in this instance, we were mainly interested in evaluating the project phase 1, we needed to separate clearly households that were connected through the line of LMCP phase 1. And to do so, we needed a lot of administrative data, such as a distribution network maps showing like the lines of those different phases, to have the shape files that would be processed through GIS, in order to have a list, a clear map. So thanks to that map, what we did was to use a high resolution settlement layer map of Kenya from the Center for International Earth Science and Information Network. That data was done collaboratively with Facebook Connectivity Lab and Digital Globe. So using those data, we were able to produce structure in the areas that were selected, like where we would be able to find structures that were solely connected to the LMCP phase 1 lines. And when having that high resolution data, thanks to the Center for International Earth Science Information Network, we use it on Google Earth to actually check whether indeed those structures that were identified were households. So it is after doing that verification, that validation through Google Earth, that we had a final list of households that were considered as treated and households that were considered as control households. So figure 2 shows one example from Nakuru Kunti community. We have like the areas in green where, for instance, we selected the control households, and the green line were the LMCP phase 1 lines. The red lines were previous pre-existing lines. So you see like the blue dots that are connected to the green lines are all targeted households or treated households. And the red dots are households that were considered as control group. So this protocol yielded around 5,290 households, and we had 2,071 treatment whereas 2,569 in the control group, and it was around 157 transformer communities in 6 counties. We also collected qualitative data. We had 155 key informant interviews. We conducted FGDs, business survey, and stakeholders interviews. For the methodology, when being in the field, we realized that because the initial approach that we wanted to apply was a sharp regression discontinuity design. But a sharp regression discontinuity design, for it to be implemented, we need absolutely the rules, the assignment rule to be deterministic in the sense that it will be a probability of 1 or 0. If you are within the 600 meters radius from the transformer, you will receive the program. If you are beyond, you will not. But in reality, we found out that it was not the case. Household beyond the 600 meters, some households did receive the program, while also within the 600 meters, some households did not receive. So, which means like we have a probability of receiving the program. And in that case, we have implement, adapt, change, and it will implement a fuzzy regression discontinuity design, which means like we implemented a two-stage square regression model with the treatment assignment, whether you are within or beyond the 600 meters being or instrument of you receiving the program. So we use data to do the quantitative analysis. The results that we found were triangulated with the qualitative analysis because it was important to understand some of the results that we found or some of lack of results that we found for some cases. Also, when it comes to the affordability issue, reliability, and so on, we obtain all those information thanks to the qualitative analysis. And also we did tests on main identification assumption with some baseline characteristics that we collected through recall concerning the household characteristic, whether they were there before they had the same house or the type of house they have, and try to see whether there is a jump at the continuity around the threshold. So, or the test that we conducted show that or a main identification assumption is valid. We also conducted some robustness check where, for instance, some continuous variables were log transformed to have to control for potential outliers, but also at some point we also run the SHARP just to compare the SHARP regression discontinuity, just to compare with the fuzzy one to see whether we will have different results. For the outcomes, direct outcomes for the results, overall, we did see that the LMCP was effective in increasing access to electricity for beneficiaries. We had electricity access increase by 85% through the national grid. We also found that the use of electricity for lighting has increased, and there is a reduction in the use of lighting from other sources by 17%. However, as I previously mentioned, thanks to the qualitative evidence, we found that there is an issue with the reliability and quality of electricity across locations because there was some report of power cut often and also not having, staying a few weeks without electricity. So we also found a limited increase in the productive use of electricity. For instance, household-owned businesses connected to the national grid only increased by 7%. Also, we have a productive use of electricity for agricultural activities that increased by 17%. For the intermediate outcomes, we found that the probability of studying at night in tilted household increased by 46%. However, we did not find any impacts of the project on business ownership, nor in employment, earnings, or self-employment and job creation. For the time allocation, we see that women spend more time on leisure activities, and it has increased by 1 hour. However, the time spent on sleeping, resting, or working decreased by around 1 hour as well. For the final outcomes, we saw that, okay, when it comes to the Kenya certificate secondary education, it has increased by almost 1 standard deviation for the test score. We did not find evidence of impacts of the project on respiratory health, nor on self-reported subjective well-being. So we didn't have significant results for those. However, the qualitative evidence that shows that the use of kerosene had decreased and other traditional lamps that were harmful to children. We also find an increase in the monthly average consumption expenditure of treated households by around 1,500 Kenyan shillings, but also we did not find a statistical significant effect of the project on household income, wealth creation, asset ownerships, or other household characteristics. So finally, when it comes to these methodologies that we have implemented for the last mile connectivity project, we have maybe 5 points that we can say we have learned from it. It was important definitely to conduct 1 or 2 focus group discussions prior to the field data collection, because it has helped us identify some issues, but also when for our instrument, it has helped us refocus some questions and so on. And also we did based on, for instance, the theory of change, we did have a better design for the data collection instrument, because at some point we had a wrong survey instrument, but thanks to the theory of change, we were able to keep the most important ones that were identified through the theory of change. So it's very important to have a clear theory of change from the beginning to be able to really tailor the questions and know what is important and what is not. But we understand that using a mixed method approach gives valuable information, because in most of the cases, maybe we wouldn't be able to understand the lack of results without having a qualitative analysis. And even in some cases, some of the recommendations we did in the evaluation report were based on some of those qualitative information that we got from the field, and when talking also with stakeholders. And definitely we would not have been able to have this data and have a robust methodology saying, okay, this is the causal impact of the last mile connectivity project phase 1, if we did not combine our field data collection with satellite imagery using just data and adapting our evaluation design based on some of the information that we got. And finally, I think this is an issue for most impact evaluation in, I would say, in African countries, because maybe due to a lack of resources, baseline data is not often collected. So it does hamper the assessment of project outcomes. But we would have been able, for instance, in this case, to use different indifference if we did have a good baseline data. Thank you.
Thank you, Raki. Indeed, you have given us a good reflection of how you went about designing this particular evaluation that was trying to estimate the causal impact of an infrastructure project, in this case, phase 1 of the last mile connectivity project on the beneficiaries. Also quite interesting to see how you were able to sample the interviewees in terms of the fact that there were some who had been connected to the old lines, and also others that had been connected in phase 1 and the subsequent, the phase 2 and 3 and so on, and how you were able to separate this and choose your control group and your treatment group. This was really, really interesting. And also just trying to see how you address the issue of the non-random placement of the electricity infrastructure, how you went about this. And you really brought a lot of creativity and ingenuity into this evaluation design and methodology. Thank you so much. For the participants, as we said, if you have any questions, you can type them into the question and answer box. Or later on, I will be able to take questions from you. But in the meantime, maybe I have a question for you, Eustace and Raki. And this has to do with the time that you did conduct this particular evaluation. It was conducted at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic in Kenya. And as we know that this presented a lot of challenges in terms of data collection and other issues. So we really would like to know what was the one challenge that gave you sleepless nights during this evaluation, and then how you managed to mitigate it on the design of this evaluation. Raki, maybe you can answer it, and then
Thank you.
Eustace.
Thank you, Jackie. Very good question. I think we have touched upon it a little bit during the presentation, because like we said, one of the main issues, and it has our data collection, because we needed those administrative data to really be able to say, like, we have isolated households that benefited from the program through the LMCP phase 1. But getting those administrative data from KPLC was challenging. We waited a lot. There was a lot of pressure to deliver the report by certain deadlines, but it was important to get those administrative data to be able to say that we have the household connected through LMCP 1 line and not household connected through LMCP 2 or 3 or from pre-existing lines. So, and because of the COVID-19, maybe we were not on the field, but thankfully we had some consultants that were there that were doing back and forth. Every time it was needed to send out some emails to kind of ask for those data and emphasizing the urgency of delivering the report in time to inform some other some strategies of the bank. So in that particular case, we definitely needed to have them. So it was kind of worrying, but finally we were able to obtain those data. Thank you.
Thank you, Raki. Eustace, you have something to add?
Yes, thank you very much, Jackie and Raki, and good afternoon to our colleagues. I think one of the issues that we faced was when we conducted the initial FGD in Kakamega. We wanted to understand, just like Raki mentioned, we wanted to confirm some of the data collection tools. We also wanted to investigate the robustness of the spatial sampling approach that we are using. We had a lockdown. I think it's an inter-county lockdown at the time. And so the data collection team, we are essentially stuck in Kakamega. And we were very worried about whether we'll be able to meet the timeline for delivering the evaluation on the one hand. And on the other hand, we were also worried about whether we can collect all the data across the 6 counties simultaneously, which is very important in the evaluation design. We are especially worried about collecting the data 2 months apart across several counties, and this could have implication for the validity of our empirical methodology. So I think this is one of the issues that we were worried about, but thankfully the lockdown situation was eased and we were able to collect data as planned. Thank you.
Thank you for this. Maybe another question to you, Raki, and Eustace, you can take it on too. We also note that you collected a lot of data from both the beneficiaries and the implementers of this phase 1 of the LMCP project. The question we would like to find out from you was, what surprised you from this exercise regarding when you were trying to ensure the robustness of the evaluation design? What was it in this exercise of data collection that surprised you, and how you were able to address it?
Yeah, thank you. In this particular case, if it touched on the design, one of the things where we had to, and that was the solution that we found was, okay, normally from the beginning of the project, we were expecting to have households that were not beyond the 600 meters to not benefit from the program. But finally, we found that it was not the case. And one of the approaches that I have shown in the presentation was that we use a fuzzy which means like you have a probability of benefiting from the program if you are within the 600 meter, and you have a probability of not receiving it if you are beyond. So we had to adapt the methodology, going from a sharp regression discontinuity that was designed at the beginning to a fuzzy regression discontinuity design. That's how we adapted the methodology, the design of the evaluation.
Okay, Eustace, you have something to add?
So not much to add on this. I think Raki has made the right call, but I think in my own view, some of the interesting things that we found was that it wasn't possible to conduct this evaluation without GIS data and shape files on the pre-existing lines of previous connections of LMCP phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. So this was clear. And thanks to KPLC, we had quite capable GIS engineers in most of the cases that provided us with this data. And I think related to that is that we needed the data in a particular file format to be able to run it with the Aegis model that we designed that was compatible. And we had certain instances where we had a lot of back and forth between the engineers to get the file in the right format. So I think that the level of cooperation between our organization, the bank's office in Kenya that supported us, having competent consultants, having competent data collection firm, as well as competent engineers within the power utility, are really can be overestimated in conducting these kinds of impact evaluations. Thank you.
Okay, so we also depend on the capacity of the implementers to help when we are doing this kind of evaluations.
Precisely.
Yeah. We have a question in the chat. And the question is, how closely did you collaborate with the bank's operations teams in Kenya and at the headquarters? And how does, and then it is followed by a second question, how does IDEV work with the bank on impact evaluations while maintaining its independence?
Maybe I can try to reply to this.
Okay.
I think throughout there is a very close collaboration between IDEV and the bank when conducting an evaluation. It starts from the inception phase. Even before that, when we have a concept note, we have to send it first, for instance, to the relevant department for them maybe to provide their inputs and also see what is relevant for the department in terms of what the evaluation will produce in terms of results, because we have to have added value. So it's good to do evaluations, but it's good also that is useful for the department maybe that had implemented that project. So from the beginning, we have that, but also we have the reference group where we have staff from the relevant department that will be part of the review process, inception report, also the technical report when we have the first results, summary report as well. We have meetings with them to discuss our results. And this is the case for the bank staff that operates both at the Kenya office, but also at the headquarters, because at the headquarters, I think we had some members that were part of the reference group, but also someone who was like at the country office that were part of the reference group. So it is important to include the input. So I can say that IDEV works closely with staff from the IQ and at the office, but also when it comes to maintaining our independence, definitely we do maintain our independence because our findings are not influenced by the persons in the reference group or by the discussions we have with the relevant departments. what those discussions inform is the design maybe of the evaluation, and maybe the questions that will be asked that have to provide to bring added value. But when we have our findings, we will share the findings. This is not like we will help some findings and give maybe the nicer one. It doesn't happen, never. And I think even the relevant department are happy to find out some issues that they can correct in their future operations. Thank you.
Eustace?
Nothing to add on this. I think Raki has done justice to them. Thank you.
Okay, and just questioning, because this is like one of the unique impact evaluations that IDEV has done so far, in terms of how we are adding on to our, you would say, our repertoire or our reservoir, or I would say our repository of impact evaluations. This being the first energy infrastructure kind of evaluation that we have done, what can you see that's being added to our, what you would say, to our database of methodologies from this particular evaluation, compared to the previous ones that IDEV has done, which were not impact evaluations, of course?
Yes, because when it comes to energy infrastructure, I think there were some other evaluations that that IDEV conducted prior to this one. And this one also, the methodology is different. It did tackle one, how can I say it, like, because at the beginning of an evaluation, we always try to see what this evaluation can bring. And the LMCP was chosen particularly because it was trying to tackle the affordability issues that were flagged by previous evaluations of the energy sector done by IDEV. So, and these, some of our findings that we did not emphasize here, really do show that the affordability issue is important when it comes to increasing electricity access. And I think even the bank does know it, Kenya government does know it, because in 2021, here I'm a bit digressing, but just to say like how affordability is important in Kenya in this particular case, there was a task force that was mandated by the president of Kenya to try to provide recommendations how to improve the energy sector in Kenya. And even one of the recommendations was to cut the cost of electrification in order to increase electricity access, particularly for low-income households. And in this evaluation, the added value was to see whether having a project where there is a subsidy for low-income households, does it really lead to the desired results? Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, that's quite interesting. Affordability is an issue, especially if you're talking about electricity all over Africa. Okay, so is there anyone who would like to ask a question? Maybe we can take hands. Okay, so I have a question maybe to Rufael. Do you have any advice for evaluators that would be taking on evaluations such as these in future?
Thanks, Jackie. I think evaluation as evaluators, you know, this is a very interesting evaluation, but in general, for any evaluation, I think it's very important to underline the supply and demand side. I think when I say supply side, I think we need to continue to invest and refresh our staff on the, you know, the appropriate tools and methods, and we need to create also enabling environment for our evaluators. I think we can see that I think this is just not within the scope of the evaluators as a management, and also with working in partnership with the management and the board, we need to create awareness to invest more on the baseline, because when you do, it's very difficult to do impact evaluation without a baseline. The second, I think I found it is very important, and as evaluator, we need to know and understand our role as evaluator, and this is really way trade-off between quality, time, and I had a number of conversations with my team members during the evaluation process. Sometimes they had dead timelines. We have to meet lines, but we're gonna compromise on the quality. And when we want to improve the quality, we need more resources. So as evaluators, how we gonna just three-way trade-off, to strike the balance between the quality of the evaluation, the timeliness. If the evaluation is not timely, it's not be useful. So, and then the cost. So I think this is from the supply side. It's very important as evaluators. We need to, always, not only for this impact evaluation, but for any other evaluation. From the demand side, I think we have to ask why we evaluate. At the end of the day, they are intended audience, the management, the board, and the general public. So I think, especially on impact evaluation, what we want to understand is what works, what's not working, and why. That so that it's inform, this hard evidence inform future policy or future interventions. I think we need to at least two key variables are very important in this aspect. And one is that I think earlier one of our colleagues asked a question regarding coordination or collaboration. I think we have to, as evaluators, to consider ourselves. We are like, how we gonna better achieve, in terms of effective value co-creation. How we gonna co-create the evaluation together with the management throughout the process, and engaging them in the evaluation question setting, on the methodology design, on the finding, even when we state the recommendations, how that will be useful for management and the board. So I think engaging throughout the process as a value co-creation is very important, because sometimes, we as evaluator, we want to supply evaluation, but there is intended purpose for that evaluation. We want to add value. So in order to add value, I think we need to start from the inception in terms of with the mindset in terms of value co-creation. We are there as one actor. So to together to create, knowledge in that process. The other one, I think, is related to more, is for Jackie and for the team, working hard on knowledge and communication. I think the products, I think we are sometimes, we produce technical reports, summary reports done. But there is a quite increasing demand for like diversified evaluation products from the broad spectrum of audiences and potential evaluation users. So what are exactly the needs of evaluation? Maybe for the board, if they get a one-pager policy brief about the key findings, they don't have time to read maybe 100 pages of our technical report, or maybe 30 pages of our summary report, 1 pager, 2 pages. So I think we need to innovate a bit on, the product, so that, at the end of the day, we, like if you, Raki and Eustace and, the team, Jackie and all the involved in this process invested a lot of time and energy. But if that's not be utilized, then it's a waste of resource and time and your energy. So I think we need to think of, what's the best way, we have different audiences, and we need to understand from their side, what kind of product is useful for them to produce, so that the evaluation to be useful. Thanks, Jackie.
Okay, yeah, so we take that very keen observation that we also need to take seriously the kind of products that come out from this evaluation, and make sure that at least it reaches as many users whether it is, as you say, policymakers or the board or the implementers, wherever they are. Of course, both in Kenya and all the other countries that are going to be implementing or have already started evaluations, projects such as the last mile connectivity project. Thank you, Rafael. We have a hand raised. Kate, you have a question to ask. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. And thank you for the very interesting presentation, Aki and Ustas. My question follows on from what Rafael was saying about timeliness. Timeliness being key to any evaluation being delivered to the bank's board or the management for further decisions on strategies or on further phases of a project. Of course, timeliness is very important for delivering an evaluation. So how in an impact evaluation do you determine at what period you should carry out the evaluation? How long do you have to wait after the end of a phase of a project before you can credibly measure the impact? And how do you make sure that that time lapse is not too long so that the impact will not be lost or diluted?
Thank you, Kate, for your question. I think this is a very tricky question in the sense that it will depend on maybe the type of project you will be evaluating. If we were to evaluate, for instance, on a hospital, definitely we will need to wait until the project has ended and maybe households in the area have started using maybe such infrastructure, and maybe we will have to wait 2, 3 to 4 years for health benefits to have, because we know it is a long-term outcomes. But in the case of this program, it has not yet been completed. It will be closed at the end of December 2022. But because it is an electrification project and it was about connecting some areas along the line, so it did start since 2016. There have been households that have been connected. So it was progressive, and I think the peak of the connection was in 2018. So definitely with the time of data collection, which was in 2021, we have already for like the peak of the connection of households between 2018 and 2021, we kind of have already 3 years in between. And also if we consider those households that were connected since 2016, we have more years. So definitely it will depend on the infrastructure and the type of outcomes that you will be looking at. And we understand that, okay, time is very important, because maybe even in some cases where we did not see impact on health or on outcomes or jobs, it takes time, definitely, for a community to be able to reap the benefit of electrification and maybe create jobs with the support of the government or any other institutions to maybe have other basic infrastructures that they will need to be able to reap fully the benefits of electrification. Yes, that's my answer for your question. Thank you.
Maybe quickly to add, if I may, Jackie.
Yes, please. Go ahead.
I think there are 2 levels. One, at a macro level, the work program process. There is, in terms of the IDEV, we involve with the board and the management, and we have a 3-year work program. And every year we are committed to do one impact evaluation. Because impact evaluation is is extremely not only cost, also time taken, and we need to also that evaluation to be useful. It's a very good question in terms of, so I think it's good to in terms of the timeliness that is captured as part of the work program. But I think one thing very important to highlight here is that impact evaluation, even when you look with other MDBs, there are some colleagues here in the meeting, like for example, World Bank, the independent evaluation is not doing impact evaluation. The economic research is the one doing impact evaluation. Impact evaluation can be done at different level, like it can be baseline, you have midline and end line. So that in end line, you have enough time to see the impact so that we can, demonstrate that, the project has some sustainable impact, to capture the impact. If you do it quickly, you may not capture the impact. So I think for us as IDEV, in terms of the, what within, from our experience we learned, and what we said is that let's select innovative projects. Like for example, last mile we didn't have last mile in the past, and this is the first intervention last mile in rural settings, more underprivileged people. And this is electricity. We don't know what works and what's not working. We don't know whether it's cost effective. Is it affordable? Is it sustainable? So I think understanding this helps for the management, the board, to make decisions, similar decision to scale up the investment. This helped. Now you can see, if you see in board meeting, Rwanda is approved, Uganda, Mozambique, last mile initiatives. Yeah. So what I'm saying, we are very selective sector. So we did water and sanitation, one agriculture, last we did one transport. Now, this year we are doing health infrastructure. We did one energy. We're gonna select a pilot initiative, like for example, transport, we did last year, is integrated transport investment. So it's not just only the transport, but we have a number of investment within that project, so that we want to see the impact. So we are very selective in terms of, it's not like other evaluation to inform a specific strategy or policy, but it's more informing about, giving empirical, hard evidence, what works, what's not working for the, for the board and management before they make huge investment, because this is very capital intensive. So timeless, always we need to take into account, but it's not like other evaluation. For example, if we have a country evaluation, there is a deadline we have to deliver within that, otherwise it's not be useful. Or if you have a new private sector development strategy, we have to deliver within that time, otherwise this evaluation is not useful. But for impact evaluation, we are selective, we are informing, future investment for the bank, in terms of informing on what works and what's not working. Thank you.
Okay, it's actually good to see what you're saying. It's looking at projects that are kind of fairly fresh in a way, because last mile was kind of a fairly fresh project for the bank, and knowing that the bank is actually making similar investments in projects like these, and therefore knowing that if we carried out this impact evaluation, it would definitely inform a lot of processes within the bank and also for our implementing partners and the countries in which we work. Thank you for that observation. I also learned that we can have a baseline and a midline impact evaluation. I didn't know that. I thought it was always endline. Yes, so that's new learning on my part. Eustace, you have something to add?
Yes, thank you, Jackie. Thanks, Kate, for the very interesting question. I think that, so I'm going back to the evaluation itself. For the last mile connectivity project phase 1, the exciting thing about this project is that it's sort of phased. So this is the initial phase. And it's also exciting that the bank was the MDB that really financed this program, and other MDBs like the World Bank and the Japanese now join as partners. And it's currently in its 5th phase. So you have the 2nd phase financed by the IBRD, and then Agency de Français Développement for the other phases. So what we did was that we focused on those counties that had installed, that had already been connected initially. So our selection protocol actually does not yield a random sample of treatment, and it does not, our selection protocol uses a random sample of treatment and control households within the transformer community, not a random sample of transformers. So We focus on the transformers that have already been connected previously. So that is where we are able to see some impacts. But I also agree that some impacts for electrification do take time to manifest, such as impacts at the household level. So we should expect certain impacts to come along over the medium to long term. So I think that for the long-term impact, we usually would expect that from 5 years. So I think that just to the question, Kate, we'll be able to get more impacts actually about the electrification across the board again around 5 years. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Eustace. Okay, I don't know if we have any other questions. Yes, Andrew, you can ask your question. You please unmute your mic. Tanya, could you help Andrew?
Error because I'm trying so many times to open his mic. Okay, now it's open. Okay.
Can you now hear me?
Yes, we can.
Very good. So I was just trying to say that the presentation was nice and congratulations. I just wanted to ask about one key finding which appeared, and it is about the fact that household consumption was significant statistically, while household income was not significant. I was just trying to wonder what could actually be happening. I was just wondering whether there is any qualitative evidence that could try to explain why that was the case, because there is a relationship between consumption and income. So that is what I just wanted to ask if Raki or Eustace tried to check why those findings appeared the way they appeared.
I will try to take this question. Thank you very much, Andrew. This is a very good question, and I think this question, even I think at some point was raised when we were writing the report. One of the reasons that could come to my mind of why we have a high consumption, like a significant consumption, but no impact on income. If we look at on the productive use of electricity, we see that agricultural activities, we found significant effects for productive use of electricity on agricultural activities. And if we consider, for instance, we are not sure on that, but in my own understanding, if we consider, for instance, that household will be consuming most of the agricultural production, it may explain why we can see a higher significant consumption, but no income if in the case in most rural areas, maybe they are not selling the agricultural product for revenues, but rather consuming it. So it could be one way to explain these results, but it could be also other factors that we are not really taking into account. Thank you.
Thank you, Raki. Eustace, you have something to add?
Yes, I think the only thing I have to add, and indeed, I think this is an interesting question that we really grappled with, and I will encourage participants to have a look at the technical report as well as the summary report, because we delve deep into asking ourselves what may actually be the, what is actually happening. I think that one of the main issues that we have is that even though the subsidy has reduced the cost for households, still the 15,000 Kenyan shillings is a significant proportion of the income of households. And there's evidence that they were actually consuming, they were actually buying tokens over time. So it's also possible that when you look at how the spending pattern of the households and to homemade agricultural consumption themselves, you can see that assuming a household spends say 30% of its income on tokens and uses this token for small scale mechanized irrigation to be able to produce these products, and then consumes this product without most of them reaching to the market. You can see that consumption is taking place, but the money is being spent on consumption of token as well as consumption of the goods that we produce, just like Raki mentioned. But I think that with time, maybe this would also be a line of inquiry for other researchers and evaluators to interrogate going forward for the LMCP in other phases.
Yeah, actually, exactly, especially when we looked at this project that it was covering what you'd call low-income rural areas. It's quite striking to see that their consumption goes up, but income is not really coming, not increasing. And yet we are hoping that that with these kind of projects, we see incomes going up. But like you say, and I think one thing that came up from your evaluation, where you made one of the findings or the lessons, was that it would be good to integrate electricity projects with other income generating projects, so that people in such areas are able to use electricity productively.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Jackie. Yes, I think that's otherwise, Andrew, first acknowledge Andrew. He has a role in this evaluation. Thanks for your support throughout the process. This is general truth, in the classical economic thought, consumption increase as the current, like income increases, and then, it's normal that the consumption is, related in terms of the disposable income. And when, a person income increases, then that the majority, possibility to consume also increases. That's just theoretically. But I think in practical, I just want to also to refer some evaluation related, for example, in East Africa, in Southern Africa, ICT initiatives. People spend on mobile phone. They are increasing spending, but you don't see that translated into. So I think that's the concept of what is development, what is, in terms of the choice, the freedom of choice of the beneficiaries, because some people, they feel secured if they have mobile, even though they can't afford, they buy mobile and they feel, because sometimes there are some area there are security issues. So you don't see it translated into income, but there are development is not just income. There are other dimension, multidimensional, aspects of development. So there are, this classical economic thought, we need to, not always it's linear. We need to, especially in Africa, when there is a fragility, there are a lot of other factors that contribute to inverse relation. But in this project, I think to acknowledge, that's this evaluation done, it could be done a bit later to see a proper impact over time, because we saw only on the agriculture, otherwise on like, for example, small and medium enterprises on, you don't see any major impact, on this project. But we expect, in theory, we expect some impact, but it's too early to see that change. So maybe that also contribute. But yeah, this is, I agree, it's general, but I think we need to also take the context where we are operating. Thanks.
Thank you, Raphael. Okay, I think we have exhausted most of the questions that we had on hand. So I would like to take the opportunity, first of all, to thank the presenters. Thank you so much for this very useful and very interesting presentation that you made. And of course, giving us all these insights on how this impact evaluation was designed and how you went about collecting the data and all the different interventions that you had to do during this period of the COVID-19 pandemic, and then being able to actually get those estimates or the evidence of the causal impact of the last mile connectivity project on the people that received it. Thank you for the learning, and I would like to encourage participants, please, this evaluation is available online. You can download it and get some more information. We do have an executive summary as well, and some other knowledge products that are coming up. Please do keep checking the site for the knowledge products that are coming up. And so with that, I would also like to thank my team who are helping, the IT support and everyone else who's helped us to be able to conduct this webinar. And we just say that the recording is going to be available on our website. And so if there's anything else that you want to refer to, you can always go back to refer to the recording on our website. And also thank the attendants. Thank you so much for attending. And you can always ask us follow-up questions later on. Our evaluators are on hand. And as we said, we have all our contacts on the website. So thank you so much for coming in. Do have a lovely rest of the day today. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Mm.